Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking about one of the significant events that happened today in history. I want you guys to open up your Today History apps on your phones real quick.
He's there too.
Okay, you got it? Okay, real quick before we talk about the main event, I want you guys to kind of go through and see just some of the events that have happened today. And I want you to go to one in particular and just kind of see what you can find. When you click on the actual links, there are internal links that bring you to other websites that has more in-depth information about the event or the person that it is talking about. And I want you guys to just see what you can find. And let's see. And then when you find something, I want you guys to share with the class and tell me something interesting that you found about that event.
It happened in Selma, Alabama.
And what are you talking about? What event are you talking about?
We're the Bloody Sunday.
Bloody Sunday. Okay.
Mine is about a German liner that became the first ship to send wireless signals to shore.
Oh, okay. That was early 1900s? That was like 19...
It was 1900.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. That's some interesting stuff you guys found in the app. Today in History is a very useful app, I would say. We're going to be using that more often in class. But in particular today, we're going to be talking about Bloody Sunday. Today it is March 7th, 2018, but this happened in March 7th, 1965. So, Bloody Sunday was basically a big civil rights march that happened in Selma, Alabama. And before we get in depth into it, I kind of want to go through the backgrounds and stuff and basically kind of talk about how it all started. So, July 9th, 1964, Judge James Hare issued an injunction. So basically this injunction told the civil rights activists that they were not allowed to be in big groups, and basically they're not allowed to fight or talk about the civil rights and what they want to change about the civil rights. So this basically upsetted a lot of civil rights people, and it made them feel as if they were getting not enough justice and they were becoming more suppressed, and that upset it a lot, and so action had to be made. Frederick Douglass Reese requested that Dr. King and the SCLC, which was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is what Dr. King led. It was a big group, and they met at the big church of not Selma, Alabama, but it was a different city in Alabama, and they met in this big church, and they would talk about the different problems and issues that were arising and that were prevalent during this time period. And so Frederick Douglass Reese, he was a part of the my bad. I did not put that on there, but he was a part of another organization group that basically they were more worried about the voting rights of African Americans and not their overall rights. And so they were a little hesitant about joining up with the SCLC to become a big force and to go against the governments that were trying to suppress them. But a group called the Courageous Eight, which were 8 people, 8 civil rights activists, local civil rights activists that came together and basically became the communication mold of all groups, and combined and allowed them to collaborate together to form one mass group to help fight against the suppression of which the judge, the sheriffs, and even the police chiefs were all trying to put against them. So, we're going to start off on January 1965. So, during this month was big for the Civil Rights Movement, as it basically was the month that reforms started to, or ideas of reforms started to be brought up, motions started to be put in play, and the activists were basically taking more action to make sure that their rights were being given. And there were all kinds of rights that were trying to be fought for. So it was voting rights, it was rights to drink out of the white water fountain, rights of being able to attend schools where white kids attended. There was multiple issues that were prevalent and prominent during this period and in these locations. So, Dr. King would end up meeting with President Johnson, who again was the president that had came right after, as we know, John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and so he was the vice president, but he ended up having to come in after the assassination. So, and again, he was more of a Democratic-sided president, so he was very big on supporting the Civil Rights Movement and try to do whatever he could to help out. But at the same time, you had to think, because at this time period, the mental process of what people thought of when it came to African Americans and their rights, especially down south, was not very supportive. And you still had a strong force within the governments of the South, in particular in Alabama and in Virginia and all those places where a lot of these big events have happened. You had these people fighting against President Johnson and basically not wanting things to be done. However, but again, the civil rights people, they had to find a way to make their voices be heard, to, make it become a national not a national crisis, but they wanted to get the national attention of people. So, they came together at Dr. King's church, and they tried to plan it at a time where Sheriff Clark and Chief Baker were not around. Sheriff Clark at this, it was January 2nd, 1965, the day after New Year's. They planned it on this specific day to make sure that Sheriff Clark was not there, which he was out of town. And then Chief Baker also, he was in town, but the thing about Chief Baker is he was more in between, so he wasn't really highly against the civil rights movement. He tried to, but he wasn't fully for it as well. He just tried to stay in the background because, again, he was at a high position, so he didn't want to lose his position. But at the same time, he didn't want to go against the racist people. So again, they all met together and basically came up with all the ideas to really get the movement going. And their train of thought was, okay, how can we make an impact without making physical violence, without causing trouble, and basically trying to avoid another civil war. And so their only solution really they came up with that would make a big impact was having a march. So they gathered these ideas of having a march, and so after this march happened, well, before the big March of Selma happened, many of the activists would go to government buildings such as the Capitol buildings of Alabama or the courthouses. So there was one incident where there were some activists that came into the courthouse, and Chief Baker, he maintained his cordialness to the African Americans that were trying to protest. However, Sheriff Clark, who was one of the policemen under Chief Baker, he was flat out a racist. He didn't like black people, he wanted nothing to do with them, and he was very strong about it, very public about it, and did not care. So, as these people kept coming in, he kept arresting more people, did not care about their rights. He kept arresting, and he ended up arresting about 225 people. Of those 225 people, one of them was Amelia Boyton. Now, can one of you guys tell me who Amelia Boyton is? Do you guys remember? So Amelia Boyton was one of the, she was like that woman that you see, like she was in the wheelchair with Barack Obama and Michelle Obama in the Selma front. I don't know if you guys saw the Selma front march. She was the one in the wheelchair. But she was basically one of the leaders by Dr. King and the other activists. I'll get to that in a second. But she was one of the frontier people. She was a woman, and she was strong about her rights. And she was one of those people that was not afraid to show her disapproval of the way they were being treated. So, again, and another fact I want to tell you guys about is the majority of these registrants and these civil rights activists were sharecroppers and blue-collared workers, as well as students. Do you guys know what blue-collar workers are, by the way? I don't know if you guys remember what that is. They could be. Yeah, so basically a blue-collar worker is someone that's not a part of the agriculture field. They were more in the industrial industry, so like engineering or working at factories and stuff. They weren't a part of like this actual like cropping or farming and stuff like that, which again was still very big at this time. This was the 1960s, so there wasn't a lot of advanced. There was advanced technology, but the technology that we have today didn't allow them to have the jobs that they could have today. So, but there were still some blue collar workers that were involved in this this whole ordeal. So February comes along, and basically now at this point of the month, their whole mindset was, okay, we don't see anything really happening. We tried this for a month, nothing's going on. So we need to make this public. We need to get noticed. So Dr. King got himself arrested alongside Robert Abernathy, which was basically like one of Dr. King's best friends. He was always with Dr. King. Wherever Dr. King went, Robert Abernathy, he was there all the time. So Dr. King got himself arrested, and basically he didn't want to post bond, he didn't want to do anything. He wanted people to get out and protest. And basically him getting arrested, and you got to think, Dr. King basically was the president of all the black people. So you're basically trying to arrest, okay, let's say, imagine somebody trying to arrest Donald Trump. Now, a lot of us might not like it, but, well, Democrats might not like it, but Republicans, they would go nuts. They will go crazy. So it's the same ordeal. Black people, Dr. King. Dr. King got arrested, everybody went crazy. You had students, you had workers, you had people all around the states of the South coming together and protesting and making their voices heard. And that was going through courthouses. They showed up anywhere that the media basically was at. They went there to get their voices heard. So that was huge. Now, another person that was very big or started to really come up into this area, because Malcolm X, he was more in California, more West Coast. But he saw what was going on, and he was like, okay, I need to start coming. I need to come down to the South. I need to get myself involved and try to help out. However, Dr. King didn't really want Malcolm X's help, because Malcolm X, he was more about violence. He was more about taking action in our own hands. He was like, I want to beat down somebody. You know, if we gotta shoot, we shoot. Like he was a gangster. Malcolm X was a gangster, so he didn't play that game. But after talking to Coretta King, which was Dr. King's wife, he basically said, okay, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to try to start any problems. I am just here for a backup plan. So basically Malcolm X was already planning out, okay, if Dr. King's, if his, or if his strategy doesn't work, then we're going to do it my way, which is, okay, we got to take actions into our own hands. So, fast forward a little bit, February 4th comes along, and President Johnson finally makes his first public speech. Now, President Johnson, again, like I said, he was more behind closed doors supportive, but he never came out as publicly supporting the civil rights movement. But again, February 4th, he came out, he said a speech, and this got a lot of people's attention. This got a lot of people's support for the civil rights activists. So, the Justice Department urged Judge Thomas to suspend the literacy test. So, the literacy test was basically, at this time, you might not even know this, but it was still being given to people down south in order for them to be able to be eligible to vote. So, African Americans down south still, in certain areas, had to go and take a literary test to show that they were incapable of being smart enough to vote, basically. And they started doing that when the slaves were around. And so around this time, they were still doing that. But the Justice Department urged Judge Thomas to get rid of that. And basically, they came to a agreement, as you would say, a compromise. And basically, the agreement was, okay, we'll let 100 applicants be accepted per day. So only 100 people could register as a voter per day. Like, they set limits. So yeah.
Was it so like black people couldn't vote? Is
Yeah.
that what it was? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
he wasn't letting all the black people vote.
Mhm.
Okay.
So basically, like, the literary test, it was the legal way, because I mean, legally you can't, because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was illegal to keep African Americans from voting, basically. So, but again, by getting rid of the literary test, it basically, anybody, whether you were dumb, smart, whatever, you could vote. That's basically what, it got rid of. So, all right. So the actual event of Bloody Sunday came a month and a few days later. Basically, Bloody Sunday really got fueled up during Jimmy Lee Jackson's death. So, Jimmy Lee Jackson was just an ordinary person that was part of one of the marches to the courthouse in Marion, Alabama. So Jackson basically was a part of the group, and so after the march had happened, somebody called into the police station and basically reported them as a threat. And so the state trooper by the name of James Bernard, he was the one that actually shot Jackson while he was walking into a cafe. And about 8 days later, he actually died from his injuries. So that really got everybody mad. I mean, it was more of a peaceful, this pissed people off, basically. It made people mad, they were not playing. So after that, I mean, the biggest argument was that it was a violation of their constitutional rights. I mean, every person that's an American citizen has that right to vote or to protest. It's the freedom of speech. It's one of the First Amendment. I mean, this is what it is. So they were mad. They were like, okay, we need to really let this be known. So Bloody Sunday comes, which was March 7th. A group of about 525 to 600 civil rights activists all came together and locked arms, and they marched across the bridge trying to get into Selma, Alabama. Their whole point of getting to Selma was to talk to the governor, which was George Wallace. And so they wanted to talk to the governor basically about this whole incident that went down, and basically they just wanted to defend their rights to the governor himself. But unfortunately that didn't happen, as state troopers, and they had the whole police union that was just blocking these people from getting in, and it was their legal right. They could do whatever they want, basically. So the aftermath basically was Turnaround Tuesday, which basically the marchers were given the chance to march again, and this time there was going to be no force against them. And it wasn't just the original 525 marchers. There was people from all across the country that traveled to Alabama. So it ended up getting to about 2,000 to 3,000 people marching together to Selma, finally, and being able to get to their place and their destination. And also the Voting Act was also passed, so it allowed all African Americans, no limitations, nothing. They can vote however they want. There was no limitations. There was no, only 100 people per day. It was just, you all can vote. So And yeah, so this was